Hey guys, it's Justine here from I Should Read That, and today I am bringing you 6 2020 releases that I haven't read yet. So 2020 was my strongest reading year ever in terms of numbers. I read 128 books last year, but it doesn't mean that I got to everything I wanted to. I ended up having some new releases sort of slip between the cracks a little bit last year. A lot of that was because I think, like a lot of people, I was doing a lot of mood reading and just picking up whatever my brain wanted, especially during kind of the height of the pandemic and like the summer and slipping into winter as well. Just everything was awful at various points last year. So I just kind of read whatever my brain wanted, which was great because I read a lot, but it does mean that I missed out on some really highly anticipated new releases for me. So these 6 books are ones that I was all super hyped about. I was really excited to get my hands on. Some of them are the beginning of new series, some of them are sequels, some of them are series conclusions, and I desperately wanted to read all of these, but I just didn't find the time. So these are all definitely on my TBR for this year. I'm really looking forward to going ahead and cracking on with all of these books, but these are 6 that I didn't end up getting to last year. So the first book in my stack is a sequel, and a lot of people were really excited about this when it came out, and they were even more excited when the first book came out. So this is Harrow the Ninth by Tamsin Muir. Gideon the Ninth was her first book. I think it was her debut novel. It was the first book in this series, and people like lost their minds over it. People loved it. It is a super fun, but really weird sort of sci-fi and fantasy blend. If you haven't picked it up yet, I would encourage you to do so because it's a wild ride. The audiobook is really good, so I would recommend doing that if you kind of have trouble getting into the actual like physical copy, which I would totally understand. I tried to read Gideon the Ninth. I made it like 60 pages in twice, gave up, and then decided to do the audiobook, and I loved it. So I think I gave Gideon the Ninth 4 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed it, and by the time I read it, we were only a couple months away from Harrow the Ninth coming out, so I definitely expected to pick it up as soon as humanly possible, and it just never really happened. So in the first book, in Gideon the Ninth, we follow a character named Gideon who is sort of orphaned and stuck on this horrible planet kind of way out there, and it's part of this empire, and she is desperately trying to get away. However, the sort of daughter of the house, Harrow, catches her and makes a deal. She has to go and do this thing for the emperor and to serve the empire, and Gideon is going to serve as her cavalier, basically as like a sword-wielding bodyguard. And if she does this, then Harrow will kind of give her all of the paperwork she needs to get into the military, which is the thing she wants to do. She can finally escape. So the two of them hate each other, but they end up having to kind of work together. It was really fun. It's like part fantasy in a sci-fi setting meets kind of murder mystery, meets kind of, I don't even know what, weirdness. And I know that the weirdness gets really cranked up to 11 in this one, and I'm very much looking forward to it. So next up I have a YA historical fantasy novel. This is These Violent Delights by Chloe Gong. So this made a big splash when it came out, I think it was fall of last year, and I'd had a digital copy for ages from NetGalley, a review copy, and for whatever reason I never got around to it. So I got the physical copy because I was really excited for it, and still never got around to it despite the fact that I really desperately want to read this book. So this is a really easy one to explain. It is basically a retelling of Romeo and Juliet set in 1920s Shanghai, and we have gangs, and we have, you know, politicking, and we have monsters, and it sounds like so much fun. So I've heard amazing things about this one, although a lot of people are starting to do that thing where it gets tons of praise at first, and then more people start to read it, and now I'm hearing some more mixed things, but I am really looking forward to reading this. I think it's going to be so fun. The sequel was just announced. I'm not sure if it's going to be a trilogy or a duology, but I would really like to get this read before the next book comes out. Next up is a book by one of my favorite authors that did have some controversy when it came out. This is A Deadly Education by Naomi Novik. So this is the first in her Scholomance series, which is a brand new series from her, and it's basically a deadly magic school, kind of like Hogwarts, but like amped up to 10 where everything is trying to kill you. This sounds like it's going to be exactly my cup of tea. I love a good magic school, and I'm really looking forward to this, although it does have some kind of controversy around it. There's some microaggressions that ended up in this book that have been removed from subsequent printings and everything like that, and she's addressed it and all of that. So I know a lot of people were really hesitant about this book, and I was very hesitant about it because I think that stuff came out a week after I bought it. So I never ended up getting to this one. Even subconsciously it kind of slipped down the TBR a little bit, but we are going to have the next book coming out in September, I think. It just got pushed back. So it is one that I'm very curious to read. I would really, really like to pick this up soon because it does sound like my cup of tea, but I am really happy that I know that there's maybe some things to look out for that I probably wouldn't have noticed otherwise. The next book that I have is co-authored, so it is actually written by two people, one of whom I am very familiar with and whose books I love, and the other I have not actually read anything by, so this should be really interesting. This is Seven Devils by Elizabeth May and Laura Lamb. If you have seen my Best Books of 2020 video, you may know that I love Laura Lamb's writing. Goldilocks was one of my top 10 books of last year, and I have read a couple of other things by her that I've really, really loved. She's an author who's very much kind of on my radar, as I will read anything by her and we'll probably have a good time. So I am very much excited about that aspect of things. I've never read anything by Elizabeth May. She is the author of the Falconer series, which is a YA historical fantasy series set in Edinburgh, I think, or in Scotland anyway, which sounds fun. I have the first book on my shelf, and I have for several years. It's me. But this looks like it's going to be really fun. I do have a little bookmark in here. I don't know if you can see that. I started this for the Space Sirens book club. I think this was our January book, and it wasn't what I wanted at the time. This book is definitely very like squatty. And it's got lots of like banter and lots of like humor and stuff like that, and it's one of those things where I feel like I'm either going to love it or I'm going to hate it. There's one particular character, I can't remember her name, is it maybe Chloe? Yeah, Chloe, who's like got this kind of Scottish affectation, which I find really, really cringy, which is terrible. I know both authors are American, like me, and they live in Scotland like I did for a long time. But there's something about the kind of like the Scottish affectation that I couldn't deal with at the time, but it is one that I really want to pick up because I think it could be a really good, rollicking, fun sci-fi adventure. So when I'm feeling more in the mood for like less murdery stuff, which is what I'm reading right now, and more fun stuff, this is definitely one that I'm going to pick up. Next up, I have the highly anticipated ending to one of my favorite series ever, and the reason I haven't picked this up yet is because I think it's gonna really bum me out. So this is The Burning God by R.F. Kuang. The Poppy War series is one of my absolute favorite series ever of all time. The Poppy War was my #1 book of 2018 when it came out, and I think The Dragon Republic was one of my top books of maybe 2019 when I read it, and I love this series. I have a lot of love for this series. I love grimdark, but it is definitely something I need to be in the right mood to read, and in the middle of a pandemic dealing with really serious depression issues, I don't think The Burning God is quite the thing for me right now, but it is one that I'd really like to pick up soon. And the last book that I have to show you guys is one that I've been banging on about for a long time. It's been on multiple TBRs and I haven't gotten around to it yet, but I'm really hoping to make time for it soon because it's the sequel to one of my favorite books. This is Hollow Empire by Sam Hawke. This is the sequel to City of Lies, which was one of my favorite books of 2019, maybe? I can't keep straight when I read stuff anymore, but this was one of my best books of the year when I did end up reading this. It is a really, really fabulous fantasy story in this amazing world. The first book is like part murder mystery and part fantasy novel. It's got these two amazing point of view characters, brother and sister Jovan and Kalina, and they're just fabulous. Everything about this is fabulous, and I loved the way that City of Lies ended, and I know that this takes place, I think, 5 years later or so. It's not like a direct sequel, but it does go into kind of the aftermath of what happened in that first book, and I'm really, really excited to read this. I absolutely love Sam's writing. One of the things that I noticed when I read City of Lies a couple years ago was that it feels like it's written by a sort of veteran of the fantasy genre. It doesn't necessarily feel like a debut novel, because authors grow and evolve and hone their craft as they write, so usually debut novels would be a little bit more rough than something you'd read, I don't know, 5 books down the line, but City of Lies felt like a book that you would read 5 books down the line. It didn't feel like a debut novel. So it was really, really impressive to me. I absolutely, absolutely loved it. I cannot wait to get to this. I need to find the time. So those are 6 2020 releases that I haven't gotten around to yet. Every single one of them is a book that I'm so pumped to read. I cannot wait to get to them, but I haven't had the time yet, or it's not quite the right time for me to pick it up, but I am really, really hoping to read all of these books in 2021. I would love to hear in the comments below if you've read any of these books, if you have any place where you'd recommend that I should start, or if there are any 2020 releases that you just haven't gotten around to yet. I post bookish content to this channel fairly frequently, so go ahead and hit subscribe, check back soon, and I will see you next time.